my purpose in life is to make a difference in the lives of other people, to make an impact, which is why I left a business that was very profitable, where I was minting money, as it were, to come into publishing, where you know it's all about, it's a huge struggle. So I believe my purpose in life is to make the world slightly better than I found it.
Betty Irabor is a woman on a mission to spread her message of purpose. The CEO and editor-in-chief of Genevieve magazine, Nigeria's pioneer glossy lifestyle publication for women. Irabor's journey echoes with those of many great women before her, women with inner strength and resilience. From an early age, Irabor was faced with insurmountable challenges, often having to fend for herself and her siblings when her parents separated, leaving young Betty with insecurities, doubt, and a lack of confidence in her abilities, a struggle she would carry on into her later years.
The better part of my life, even growing up as a teenager and a youth, I felt really like I needed a father figure, even though my mom was playing the role of father and mother very well. But I still felt a part of me that something was missing because I was very close to my dad. I just had a kind of suspicion about men, basically. I couldn't trust any man. I felt like, you know, the minute you start getting close and the minute you start getting comfortable, the next thing they're going to be out of your life. I think that affected me for a while, because even when I was dating my husband and I eventually got married, I was trying to prove to myself that this wasn't my dad and that he wasn't going to treat me the way I felt my dad had treated me.
The 25th of March 2017 sees Betty Irabor celebrate 60 years, during which she has risen to become an inspiration for many in and out of the industry. Starting her magazine at the age of 45, Betty has braved all odds to transform her dream into the success story that we know today. She has attributed her success in entrepreneurship to an inner strength, strong will, and a sense of purpose, maintaining that entrepreneurs must possess the quality of stubbornness in order to keep going when the storms arrive. So from the time where he's left all these seeds of doubt, you know, it's really affected you. From that age of 7, at what point did you breach the gap between that and the beginning of Genevieve magazine, which is a huge dominating publication across Africa? How did you manage to go from, you know, a meek young girl who's going through all this emotional turmoil to this powerhouse?
It's funny because growing up, I didn't really have any goals. Being raised by a single mom, it was a hard knock life. You know, I was basically like the Cinderella in the house, and I did all the cooking, I did all the washing, because my mom told me later when I asked her that, you know, because you get it done, you know, I will send your siblings, it will take a while, but I could always trust you to get it done. And I was thinking about it was quite difficult for me being, you know, the big sister to my brother, who had to make sure I took a bath, and taking a bath was the last thing on his mind. So I would chase him around the compound trying to get him to have a bath. I would do all the cooking, and then I'll go to school, come back from school and cook dinner. So I kind of had a bit of resentment that why me? But then these were character traits that developed me into the strong woman that I became. Because growing up, I really wasn't that strong. I had this victim mentality. I was insecure. I lacked confidence. I didn't have big dreams like most children had, that when I grow up, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a doctor. I didn't have such dreams. I didn't have such goals. I just felt, you know, if I managed to go to the university, then I'll graduate and then get married and live happily ever after. I didn't really know that there was this woman of steel and silk. I saw myself more as a woman of silk. I didn't really know that there was some steel in me. But that became real when at 45 I decided to start Genevieve. And then that was, with the birth of Genevieve, I realized that there was more steel than silk in me, because it was something that I started, and with no industry experience, I was very, very passionate about something, and I thought I would go for it. I didn't stop running until I had the first copy in my hand, and I thought, I really did this. Oh, you did this. And that was a reassurance that I really was a strong person, regardless of everything life had thrown at me.
Leading up to when you decided that you were going to start Genevieve magazine, how did that moment come about? Because you said you had no prior experience in the publication industry. Where did it come from then? Where was the idea generated?
You know, when you have that moment, that déjà vu moment, I was in journalism for about 4 years. I was in journalism for about 4 years at the Concord Press. Again, it was just all about getting a job. I wanted to get a job and work. So I found a job at the Concord Press, and I gave it my best. Because of the upbringing I had, I find that I really could work under pressure, and there was nothing daunting because I'd been subjected to a lot of character building as a young lady. So getting into journalism was something that I felt, okay, this is interesting. It wasn't something that I deliberately went after, it was just a job. And I was on the features desk, and I remember I gave it my best, and I would get recommendations from my boss. In about 9 months, I got promoted to assistant features editor. So everything I did learning on the job. I wasn't a journalist, I read English, and I remember when I'd applied for the job, I was told, you're not a journalist, we want journalists, we don't want English graduates. But I came on board and I proved that I didn't need to be a journalism graduate to be able to write a good story, to be able to be prolific. So from then, I became more determined that journalism wasn't a bad career. But after about 4 years, I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do for too long. And I went into the corporate world. And while I was in the corporate world, I still was writing for newspapers. I was writing for The Guardian, I was writing for Vanguard, I was writing for This Day. I was just a columnist, and I just kept that writing burning in me. And then at some stage, I became the CEO of my husband's company because he was still in employment. So I was running that business, and that was what I was doing when this Saturday morning, my husband was out of town, and a friend had sent me a lot of foreign magazines. So there I was looking through the pile of magazines, and I picked one from Singapore. It was labeled female from Singapore, and it was all about fashion, lifestyle. And I held that magazine, and I was thinking, Nigeria doesn't have any lifestyle magazine for women. And I said to myself, you know what, I could do this. And I made a few phone calls trying to get investors. The same moment it hit me that I could do this, I didn't stop running. I came up with a business plan. I got an accountant of a newspaper to give me a business plan. So I came up with a business plan. I got my investors together. I had my dummy copy that I had written from memory from page 1 to 100. And that formed the basis for the template that is Genevieve magazine today.
So with that moment where you've got the light bulb moment, you know how you want to proceed, you're aggressively now pursuing it, was there any trace of that girl that had gone through this traumatic experience, or did she disappear as the moment came?
I think by the time I started Genevieve at 45, I'd known filial love, family love, because I was a mother as well. So part of what was missing in my childhood, I had been able to channel into my children. And I have a husband who also loves me. So a bit of the insecurities were not there at that particular time. I would compare what happened between when I had that copy of Female to when a copy of Genevieve came out of press. I would compare it to a tightrope walker who's walking gently on a tightrope. Then suddenly he looks down and he goes, yikes. I'm actually on the rope.
After the break, we find out how growing up in a single-parent household shaped Betty Irabor's outlook on life. Described as a Nigerian essence, Vogue, or Marie Claire, all rolled into one, Irabor has had to challenge the status quo in a male-dominated industry, surviving over 12 years in a market where the average lifespan is only 3.
Until I had a copy of Genevieve, I was just on autopilot. I was just thinking, okay, finally I'm doing something I'm passionate about, until we had the first copies of unsold magazines returned to us, and I thought, okay, they were right. This isn't a job for a woman, because I was so emotional. I was thinking we had a good magazine out there. How come we didn't sell everything? And it was kind of like someone had put a pin to my balloon, and I just felt deflated. And now the insecurities were going to start coming in again, because I was in a place where I was feeling I had a bit of self-doubt that should I have gone on with magazine publishing, because I was just like a child who had this passion for something, and I just went after it, and then suddenly I'm thinking, okay, they said it couldn't be done. They said there would be this, and those started playing up. But luckily, I had become stronger and more audacious, and I picked myself up again, and I continued to go and just continued to go. Then the accolades started coming in, and people wanted to interview me, and I just felt, for the first time, I was doing something that people recognized, and something that was impacting lives because of the stories we were telling. We're telling stories of successful people. We're telling a story that would inspire other people to get up. I was telling my story about my insecurities, about how regardless of my insecurities and my fears, and the fact that I was starting at a later age, and the fact that magazine publishing was always said to be a very difficult business with a very, very short lifespan, that I was still going ahead. I learned along the way to pause a bit and give myself a pat on the back.
Her mark in the publication industry is undeniable, and even more amazing is her story. Overcoming the stigma of her early broken home and fighting prejudice in an industry that she was initially not qualified to be a part of, Irabor has proven with time and time again that failure only happens when we forget what our purpose is. Now, I noticed one of the things that you highlighted is that it was a very male-dominated environment, so your presence was not necessarily welcomed with open arms. What was some of the negative feedback you got when you began, and how did you feel as a woman trying to penetrate a market that was foreign, really, to your gender?
I remember that I had run the idea of Genevieve by a few veterans in the industry, and they'd just laughed, in a way that said, men have tried this and failed, and then what's new? What are you bringing to the table that we haven't seen? And I was reminded about many of the magazines that had come and disappeared, and that the fertility rates of magazines were very high. I heard a lot of those things, and of course, people were saying to me, something you could have done in your 20s, you're 45, you're a woman, you want to start a lifestyle magazines. Nigerians don't read, they just want photograph album magazines that had more pictures, that Nigerians were not interested in reading. So there were so many odds against us. But it was funny, when the time is right with God, He just makes you kind of defiant. So I was very defiant. Look, the way I was before I started Genevieve, those would have been main issues for me. Enough reasons not to go into it because they said it couldn't be done. I would have had a perfect excuse. But there was a force bigger than me urging me on. So at a stage, it really wasn't about me, about the people who had failed, statistics of magazines that had come and gone. I really wasn't internalizing that. I was so focused on the fact that I could do this. I didn't know exactly how it was going to be done, but I was engulfed by so much passion about what I wanted to birth. And it was the first time I was passionate about something like that. And at that time, it didn't matter that I didn't have enough industry experience. I knew nothing about publishing. But in my head, I came up with a dummy. And that dummy has formed the template for what is Genevieve. I was sharing with one of my staff, I said from page 1 to page 100, the 100th page, everything that I envisioned was in that magazine. So of course, the old me, my old self, feeling insecure about my dad and all that, and the fact that I saw myself as someone who wasn't strong, I would have easily backed out. But not at that stage. There was just a force that just kept me going. I was blind, I was deaf to everything else but what I was focused on, and that helped a lot. And I say to people, it doesn't matter how many people who have done it and failed. What matters is that you are going to do it and you're going to succeed. Let even those negative voices be some of the things that push you to say to yourself affirmatively that it doesn't matter who's done it, it doesn't matter who's failed, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to do this. And as I said, there was just a force bigger than me, plus, of course, the passion, and plus the fact that motivation wasn't money. That was very important for me at that stage. So I just felt, the more people said it couldn't be done, the more I became defiant, the more I became audacious, the more I thought that, well, this woman is going to do it. But I really wasn't sure how far I would go, but I just knew anyway, I would do it. Do it afraid.
So you expressed you're doing it afraid. You kept going in spite of all the naysayers and the negative feedback that you would have got. But in your own journey, as you continue to keep pushing ahead, no matter what came along, what would you say were some of the major challenges that you faced that made you think, can I really keep doing it? I know there's a force. I know I should keep going, but can I really do it? What were some of the major moments that made you question your journey?
I think at a stage I was thinking, oh, maybe I should have gone to business school to learn the business aspect and marketing of magazine. And also, one of the biggest challenges was the fact that I didn't have head for numbers. I wasn't very good with my books, and those were the things that I wasn't thinking of when I was starting. And I think a lot of journalists turned media entrepreneurs are guilty. I think one of the biggest realities that dawned on me when we started was how difficult it was to circulate magazine in a country without an existing distribution network. We were at the mercy of street vendors. In most countries, magazines are sold through outlets, checkout points at supermarkets and other places like that. But in Nigeria, it's through the vendors. And we had to battle that for a long time. So distribution was one of the biggest problems. Marketing, we had advertisers' apathy, which usually comes with new magazines like, yeah, one more magazine, how long are you going to be here for? Or the other magazine, we put advertising in it, and 2 months later they were gone. So we had to continue to convince them we had come to stay. But I think because of the goodwill I had built over the years as Mrs. Betty Irabor, wife of veteran broadcaster Sonny Irabor, I enjoyed a lot of goodwill, and I would go to people and they'll be like, okay, Sonny's wife, yes, we'll give you an advert. So initially it wasn't based on how good the magazine or how well received it was. It was just about, okay, let's help this woman who's gone into publishing. We hope she knows what she's gone into. So getting adverts initially was difficult. And of course, as you know, two main revenue sources for magazines are through sales and through advertising, and maybe through other businesses that spark off, that you can spin off the magazine. So between sales and advertising, those were the initial issues that we faced, and of course, distribution. But as the magazine began to get known, and as people celebrated us and our name was there, people started thinking we could trust this magazine. And I think after the third edition jinx, people felt, okay, this magazine might be here for 6 months, 1 year, and here we are 14 years later. Sadly, the distribution issues still persist, but it's just that we've gotten wiser over the years, and we've come up with our own private distribution outlets, which I think we should have done ages ago. But then, you know, it's come at a time when we're even thinking of transitioning fully into the digital space. So those were the initial challenges.
So overcoming all those challenges, did you ever get to a point or an experience that made you think, this is it, I've lost the magazine? I know that you projected after the third issue 6 months, but did you find after numerous years that there would come an experience that you went through that made you think, I've lost the whole thing? Did anything really go wrong for you after that point?
There were many times I felt, okay, now I understand why they said publishing isn't for women. Women are emotional. I don't think men burst into tears when they see heaps and heaps of magazines that were not sold. But this woman burst into tears. Oh
Maybe some men.
We'll never know now, would we? And we're like, no way. Why didn't we sell all these magazines? But, you know, when we looked back, we saw that, come on, Genevieve, you guys can do better. 20 fonts on one page on the cover of a magazine is way too many. And of course, the print quality. And also, I started to think like a businesswoman rather than someone who was doing something that she was passionate about. I was now thinking about revenue and sustainability, breaking even, and how we can generate more income. I think those were the things that I learned along the way, which, you know, even if I had gone to a business school, believe me, you need to be really, really smart publishing in Nigeria, because what works in a different society is not going to work here. Here, people can give you an advert based on the fact that they know you, but when you're outside of Nigeria, I think it will be based on, you know, your circulation, the quality of the magazine. But after a while, Genevieve just positioned itself as a foremost lifestyle magazine, and everybody could relate. And then when we came up with a ping ball in 2005, we were tying Genevieve, apart from being a successful brand, we're now giving back to society.
There's so many young men and women that are dreaming to be like you. And you know, they follow your footsteps, they buy every edition, they go to your life lessons with Betty Irabor, they look up to you in a major way. How would you advise in this day and age, because things are currently changing so much, how would you achieve your full potential as a young person?
I think, you know, the easiest thing about anything, any business is starting. The most difficult thing is sustainability. How do you sustain a business? That is the question. A lot of people are in businesses because they want to blow. And I have no problem with blowing, but wanting to blow in 6 months so you can get yourself an SUV and show off to other people that I'm successful, I think I have a problem with that. We must learn that everything is about the long haul. It's not about the shortcuts. I cannot be defined by things that have happened in my life, and I should not play victim.